So we're speaking with Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks. I have to thank you and also tell you that you've made my life hell, both with the same recommendation. A couple years ago we met at Talkers in New York, and you said, you got to start doing video. I was thinking about it, and we did, and it's been great. But it also ended up with me having to bring all of this stuff and try to find it all within like the last 6 hours before our flight. So thanks, but also no thanks, you know.
Sorry?
Well, hey, no, it's worked great. And you guys, now here's the only thing. We have 279 YouTube subscribers on our channel. You've got 130,000. So we're lagging behind a little bit. But, you know, hey, one at a time. That's the way to get it,
We
right?
build this temple one brick at a time.
How long were you guys doing video and putting it on YouTube before you hit critical mass? Some people say it's you need 1,000, and then it starts just going on its own.
That's interesting. You know, we were definitely doing it for a while before it caught on. No question about that.
Yeah.
And the '08 elections helped us a lot because that gave us a good deal of momentum as people were gravitating towards those issues, right? But I'm not sure there was a magic moment where all of a sudden it took off. It was a real gradual build.
It was just slow and steady, keep plugging away
Right.
and doing what you do.
Right.
So I had Glenn Miller on my show a little while ago. This is the KKK guy. You mentioned it briefly in one episode I saw. He's running in Missouri, and he's running these "It's the Jews" stupid ads.
Oh, Jesus.
So I have him on the show, and we're just talking about, you know, what's his campaign based on. It's based on hating Jews. And I said to him, do you hate me personally? Like, you know, I'm
That's a
Jewish, but
great
we've
question.
never met. So I would
Yeah.
think, you know, is it a general hatred? Is
Yeah.
it me? He says, no, I hate you specifically. You are a Jew liar. And even this entire interview, the premise of this entire interview is completely bogus. So we put the interview out and start getting tons of feedback. Most of it is, hey, you handle it well, you didn't get into an argument with the guy. You can't reason with someone like that. There's a contingent that started trying to get us kicked off of some of the stations we're on, saying even having that guy on is a platform for hate speech, and there has to be some line. But to me, that line sounds like opening the door to a slippery slope, right?
I totally agree with you. I'm 100% on your side. Look, who watched that interview and thought that guy made sense? I mean, no. Look, and for the guys who thought they made sense, they were hopeless to begin with. I think letting him air his opinions in that format, with you doing the interviews and questioning him, etc., I think exposes ideas for how ridiculous and buffoonish that they are. I mean, that's a great question you asked him. Do you hate me personally? And when he says yes, he might even lose a couple of skinheads. You know, go, well,
that might be too
either.
extreme for them, even.
Right? Like, yeah, David seems like a nice guy. I mean, I thought I kind of, you know what I'm saying?
Well, the other argument that was made was somebody might hear that, and if they don't see that the host is being critical enough, they might be convinced to vote for the guy or to agree with hating Jews. But you could make that argument, even if I disagree, maybe somebody doesn't like me, that could convince them, right? I mean, you can't go by that.
No, that's crazy talk. I mean, and the guy's hanging himself. What do you need to say? I mean, you know, all you have to do is go look at how ridiculous he is. No, I'm not buying that at all.
We interviewed prior to that Paul Cameron. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's this sex researcher, but he's been fully discredited as any kind of researcher. He said if we repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, there's going to be willy-nilly gay rape in the military. Of course, the study was based on 17 people, 7 of which were people he personally knew, had him on, and it was written up in Huffington Post by an African-American gay journalist who said, a lot of people saw this interview, and they say this guy should not have a platform. Basically the same thing as with Glenn Miller. And he said, you know what, I'm gay, and I'm African-American. If this guy doesn't get on, his opinion doesn't go away. You can't just not give them a platform. I mean, it's similar to the Westboro Baptist Church. Do you agree that, where would you fall on that? I mean, if nobody has them on, do their opinions go away, or do you have to expose them?
Yeah. No, look, I think every show should make that decision case by case, right? I don't think there's any harm in interviewing the guy that you did. In fact, you expose his study for being nonsense because that so-called study is out there anyway, and he's been trumpeting that around as if it's real. And so if you can debunk it a little bit, I think you do a service. Now, the Westboro Baptist guys, I'm not too interested in them, so I don't have them on my show. But if somebody else does, I don't have any problem with that. I think, you know, it's a free country, and I mean, again, they're inordinately easy to debunk.
Sure.
So, and it could make for an entertaining show and an informative show.
Well, what about the argument, though, that just by having them on a program is giving them some kind of credibility?
I don't think so. I
You
mean,
don't buy that?
I mean, I like the Howard Stern show a lot. Do I give credibility to the dwarves that are on there, or whatever it is that we call them these days? So, you know, was
Little
it the
people.
angry midget that he calls them? I don't remember, but yeah, no. Do the lesbians on that show have more credibility? I don't know. Okay, it's absurd. No,
Just being on a program doesn't mean anything. It just means you're
Right.
on the program.
It's how you frame them, right? If CNN has them on and say, on the one hand, we have this expert saying, don't ask, don't tell doesn't make any sense, or whatever, gives sociological data, etc. And
Yeah.
on the other hand, we have this guy who's totally into gay rape and thinks it's going to happen. Well, then that's unacceptable, because you put them on an equal platform
Sure.
and you frame them wrong. But as long as you frame them right, I don't see any harm in it. And by the way, I love that guy's study. He asked like 17 of his buddies, and they're like, yeah, if gays were allowed in the military, yeah, I'd definitely do gay rape. I mean, somebody would, right?
So,
I mean,
the question of the framing is interesting to me, because we see on every news network, on blogs, everywhere, here's one opinion, here's the other opinion, here's the unbiased moderator. But on a lot of channels, the moderator is not really unbiased, and the framing isn't unbiased either. And you've been on MSNBC and a bunch of others. What's been your experience with what's going on behind the scenes? Meaning, do both parties usually in those cases know what the framing is going to be? Do they think it's going to be a totally fair setup? I mean, you tell me.
I think people have a decent sense of where people are coming at it from. Like, I've been on Fox News a couple of times, and I was never under the delusion that it was going to be a fair debate, and I knew it was going to be 2 against 1.
And is there a pre-interview that gives you a sense of what's going to happen, or you just basically show up and you know what to expect?
Different shows handle things in different ways. Like, some shows will tell you what the topic is. I mean, they got to tell you what the topic is, otherwise,
Yeah.
why are you on?
Right.
Some will give you more detailed questions. And it just varies on the detail. But nobody will tell you, oh, by the way, I'm biased in this way, it's just so you know.
By the way, it's going to be framed up to make you look silly and give you,
Right.
10% of the time that the other person gets.
Right, and if you're on Fox News, that's exactly what you expect. If you're on CNN and MSNBC, you know it's going to be really quick, and that you better be ready to lay out your case. And I'll make a slight distinction between CNN and MSNBC. MSNBC is going to get framed, I think, fairly accurately. Those shows that I've been on CNN, it's going to get usually framed from the conventional wisdom approach in Washington, whatever conventional wisdom is
At the time.
At the time, and that's usually a right-wing position, not as right-wing as Fox News, but pretty right-wing. So, I expect
You know what
that.
to expect, yeah.
Yeah.
When you're preparing for an interview, have you ever been asked by either a handler or the person you're going to be interviewing for the questions up front?
When
When you're going to do an
I'm
interview,
doing
yeah.
the interview, has somebody asked me for the questions up front? In some subtle ways, some people have. If they say, "Hey, give me all of the questions," I
Yeah.
say, "Well, good luck to you," but that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. But and I think it's fair if
Is it fair? I mean, it's only happened to me a couple of times, and it's been with some guests I really, really wanted, right? I would have hated to lose them because they wanted every question up front. But I said no, it doesn't feel right.
Right. No, if they ask you for all the questions up front, no, I don't think that makes sense. But if someone says, hey, look, you know what, I lost my kitty cat the other day and I'm just devastated by it, can you not bring that up?
Sure. That's reasonable.
Yeah, and it depends. If you're having him on to talk about kitty cats, then the answer is no.
Sure.
But if you're having him on to talk about healthcare and you go, oh, okay, you don't want to talk about your cat, okay, I can live with that,
Yeah.
because it's the context of that interview.
I actually wrote an op-ed in a local paper in Massachusetts a couple weeks ago talking about handlers, and a lot of times when I'm asked to stay away from a certain topic, the person you're interviewing, number one, is not even aware that the interviewers are being asked to stay away from that.
That's true.
And number two, sometimes I'll make the call and I'll say, they've never been on my show. Worst comes to worst, they'll never come on again. I'm just going to go there anyway. How many times have you had to make that call?
A lot.
And what do you usually do?
Well,
or is it really one-on-one? You got to handle it case by case.
Case by case. And look, it's enormously important for our show, as the ethos of our show, that we don't sell out for access, right? So if somebody says, here, ask me this question, or otherwise I won't come on, we're not going to agree to that deal, because that's not what we do. Right?
Will you announce this person was going to come on, but they insisted on knowing the questions, so we said no?
Again, depends on the context, but from time to time we've definitely done that.
Yeah.
Or if someone bails out on an interview because they found out we were actually going to ask them questions.
That's
Okay.
happened too.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I might call them out on air on that. And to give you a rough example, Lou
Yeah.
Dobbs was on the show, and his handler had, said all these different things. But I think exactly like you said, I don't think Lou knew that. And then so I'm asking him questions, and the PR person got on the line in the middle of the interview. Okay. And I'm like, are you crazy? We're on air, right? And then Lou Dobbs got mad, and he's like, no, of course I'm going to answer the question.
Right.
And shooed them away. And
So it's not uncommon that the interviewee is actually much more open to talking about stuff than their handler.
oh, yeah, absolutely. And look, they're a little bit more on the spot, and even if they had told their handler earlier, if they're on air, they're more on the spot, to be honest. But I think,
Yeah.
in general, my experience is that they're earnestly more willing to answer questions than their PR people want them to.
I've heard you talking on your show and also in some of the interviews you've done here about reaching out to the right-wingers, that eventually they'll come over to our side, so on and so forth. And when I hear that, I can only think to myself that it's like when Shirley Phelps Roper tells me that eventually the Jews will accept Jesus, and then they will. I won't go to hell, and all the others won't go to hell. I mean, it's a little hopeless, isn't it?
No, I don't think so.
It's not that bad?
Okay, but you have to be very specific about it. Okay?
Yeah.
If you're hoping that you're going to get pro-life people to go, hey, you know what, I didn't really consider about a woman's liberty and that she should maybe control her own body.
I'm going to change my mind.
Right. That's tough. It can happen.
Yeah.
And it can happen case by case. But that's, in mass, is a little tough. Right? But I'm asking for something very specific, saying, hey, look, I know you don't like your politicians being bought, and I don't like it either, right? And I'm not saying you should agree with liberal positions or progressive positions. I want to have a real fair ideological battle with you. But right now we're not having that. What we're having instead is our politicians don't serve either one of us. They serve the corporate interests that have bought them. Can I eventually get a decent percentage of right-wingers to understand that and to join that fight? I think absolutely.
You can, but there's going to be resistance if it's coming from someone on the left, right? Just on
Yeah.
principle. At least that's what I've bumped into.
Oh, of course. They're going to distrust you, et cetera. But that's normal. I mean, if Sean Hannity came with a wonderful idea, we'd be concerned,
Liberals
too.
are going
right.
to be hesitant. They're going to
Right.
be thinking, what's going on underneath this that is
Right.
causing that? Yeah.
Exactly. But hopefully, if you do it for long enough and you explain it to them very, very clearly. And look, if Hannity came with an idea, he's not wrong 100% of the time. Broken clocks, right? Twice a day,
Twice a day.
as they say.
At least.
So I'd hear him out, and certain percentage will hear us out, and certain percentage won't, and I'll get the people who will, because I am on their side. I don't want their politicians bought by corporate interests and controlled by Washington and Wall Street.
Sure.
I want to have an honest debate.
When you think about the Tea Party, I know that you get into a lot of rants about the Tea Party. I get into a lot of rants about the Tea Party. I think that the Tea Party, the better the Tea Party does, the more it will help progressive candidates, because they're taking away 8-1 or 9-1 Republican votes before they, compared to liberal votes. But that narrative, I'm not hearing it that much. Is there just something wrong about the narrative, or is there some reason that nobody's talking about it?
Well, look, there's an upside and a downside to it. The upside, obviously, is if they enter into an election, into a general election,
Right.
They've done great damage to Republicans, right? Because they're going to siphon away votes.
Yeah.
The Democrats going to win. Probably best example is 23rd District in New York, where they lost a seat that
That's
had
right.
been held since the 1870s.
Yeah.
So it's a losing short-term strategy, no question about that, especially if they go into general elections. But or even in primaries, it's probably a losing strategy, because they're going to get a person who's more right-wing, right, and less able to appeal to centrists
Once they get to the general
once
election.
they get to
yeah.
the general election.
Right.
Generally speaking, although I think a lot of people, like in Utah, for example, will think, hey, you know what, this guy's more honest than the old guy, Bob Bennett, who was a total sellout, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a mixed bag. But here's what I'm concerned about, and why I think a lot of people are concerned about the Tea Party movement. They're pushing the Overton window to the right. Okay, Overton window, for those that don't know, is where you are in the spectrum, and it moves. That window moves within the spectrum. Cheney and Bush pushed that window all the way to the right. Obama has barely pushed it an inch back, right? So that's one of the reasons we're disgruntled with Obama. As he's doing that, the Tea Party guys keep pushing that window further and further to the right. So now Obama, who I think is a center-right politician, not even a center-left politician.
Absolutely.
Okay, if your window is between Obama, who's center-right, and the Tea Parties, who are insane right, well, that's a terrible window, and you see how the Tea Parties have helped the right-wingers move the window in their direction.
It's interesting you mentioned the criticism of Obama, because on our show we've been pretty critical of him over the last couple months, and you have as well. And I start getting emails from tried and true Democrats, which I'm a registered independent. I'm not personally a Democrat. I agree mostly with liberals, saying I'm not helping the cause, as if because it's a progressive show, there's some responsibility to agree with the president, even if you don't really agree. Are you bumping up against that too?
Yeah, I get it all the time. And I tell them there's plenty of other shows that'll kiss Obama's ass. Go find those.
Right.
Okay. No, we don't do a show that's pro-Democrat. They're not my uncles. Okay. I got no interest. No, I'm doing a show on. I happen to be a progressive on progressive principles. So if Obama's not fighting for progressive principles, what's the point of fighting for Obama?
Is that something, though, that we could argue Republicans have, when they are more successful, it can be in part because they've got people that are towing the party line no matter what, and maybe there's people like you and me that don't? I mean, is that a factor?
No, it's the exact opposite. The conservative talk shows don't toe the party line at all. Look at what they did to McCain. They didn't like Dole. They didn't like George H.W. Bush. They attack Republicans all the time and push them further and further to the right. So
successfully push them to the right?
Absolutely. I mean, look at John McCain. They got that clown to go from doing a reasonable immigration bill that he co-sponsored to saying, I'll vote against my own bill.
It was his bill, right.
Yeah, I'll vote against my own bill. Have I pleased you enough, Rush Limbaugh? No, they pushed them to the right, and from their perspective, they should. And so you're not doing yourself, your cause, or even the Democrats any favor by saying, okay, I won't question Obama, I won't question the Democrats.
Oh, I agree. No, I agree.
Because it only gives them an incentive to go further right, and because they think, well, I don't have to worry about the left, I don't have to appease the left, I don't have to give them anything I promised them. All I have to worry about is appeasing the right. That's a terrible idea.
It's a bad place to be, too,
Right.
probably, yeah. Last thing, I had Ned Ryan on the show a couple weeks ago. He's like a teabagger trainer. He says he trains teabaggers on how to behave at the protests, so on and so forth. He suggested that the misspelled signs, like, thank our God will, and all those bizarre signs, are liberal plants that are showing up there to make the teabaggers look bad. It would be brilliant if that was the case, would it not?
It would be, but A, I can guarantee you that there aren't liberals that organized. Okay, and B, I don't think liberals go and waste our time on stuff like that. Like, see, like the conservatives are in this conspiracy world. Like, they love the conspiracies, right?
The liberals are all conspiring. They're coming up with ways to make them think we're conservative. Yeah.
Right, but like, think about what Rush Limbaugh did during the primaries, Operation Chaos.
Right.
Okay, why don't we infiltrate the Democratic primaries and vote for Hillary Clinton, so et cetera, et cetera. If you told progressives that, they'd be like, look, I got to go get lunch. Okay, I don't have time for this nonsense, right?
What's funny about that is there are actually lifelong Republicans that for some reason are cropping up now as registered Democrats in some of those rush districts, and they missed the deadline to go back to Republicans. So now they can't even vote in their actual Republican primaries. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's great. Look, we don't need plants to make conservatives look silly. They do plenty good job on their own in doing that. Yeah, and I'm just amused by the idea that, like, hey, let's try to make the conservatives look dumb.
Let's get signs
what
that
are
are
you talking
misspelled.
about? Their vice president was Sarah Palin.
Right.
Okay, or her vice presidential pick. Mission
If it were up to
accomplished.
them, she would be vice president right now. Yeah.
Oh, you know what, David? I just came up with not an idea, but a realization. Thank you for having me on the show and I had this conversation. Sarah Palin, a liberal plant.
She must be, all along. That's not, the thing is, to us at face value it would seem ridiculous. That was actually suggested at some point, that it was actually at the very top level when the name Sarah Palin was floated, it may have been influenced by the left. It would just be, it's giving the liberals so much credit.
Yeah. What do we
Probably
hatched-
undeserved.
We hatched a woman in Alaska who would then go and be really, really conservative and fairly hot. And then she would trick all the Republicans. And then and so she's brilliant.
Right.
She did this brilliant acting job throughout. She's the best sleeper cell in history.
She'd become governor.
Right. She becomes governor. And then then she pretends to be an idiot while being conservative. Yeah, right.
Well, this is like the Orly Tate's birther conspiracy.
Right.
It was all a plan from the start. 47 years ago with Barack Obama.
Yeah.
They brought him over from Kenya, or wherever it was. They developed the short form birth certificate, but they didn't have the long form. All along, it was a conspiracy. It's so hard to believe.
We had her on the show, and I asked her. So they planted newspaper announcements 47 years ago, knowing this kid who's being born now will
president.
one day become this half black, half white kid from, according to her, that was born in Indonesia, will obviously become president one day. So let's plant this stuff. And afterwards, she said that I was a thug to her on the show.
Yeah, I had her on too. She emailed me, and I remember saying to her, so you're telling me that Barack Obama is trying to kill you? He's manipulating your PayPal account? But PayPal now is on Obama's radar. She says, well, not him personally, but his people let the air out of my tires. I don't know.
Okay, I've attacked his people. Okay, I mean, nobody goes after Obama's people more than I do. Tim Guyton and Rahm Emanuel, etc. I haven't gotten any dead fish. I'm still all right. Nobody's manipulating
Letting
my
the
PayPal
air out
account.
of your tires.
You know.
That's right. Well, we've been speaking with Cenk Uygur from the youngturks.com. Pleasure to speak with you today.
Great to be asked. I really appreciate it. Great being on your show.
Thanks.